Tensions have been rising between Israel and Iran for some time, and the situation is close to breaking point, with multiple sources suggesting that Israel is about to not merely attack but obliterate Iran in a full-scale offensive operation. The situation is so serious that the US has already begun evacuating US citizens and military family members from the broader Middle East region. And if Israel goes ahead with this attack, it's likely to have dramatic and far-reaching implications across the Middle East and beyond. Here's what's known so far and what might happen next. Multiple anonymous sources from within the US State Department have shared information with various mainstream news organizations, including CBS, NBC, and The Washington Post, stating that Israel is ready to launch a major operation into Iran. For now, no specific details are known about what this attack might involve or what Israel's long-term intentions might be. However, given the fact that the US has decided to rapidly evacuate its citizens from the Middle East and issued travel advisory notices for the region, it's logical to surmise that Israel is planning something quite serious here. US action began on June 11, with the State Department ordering the departure of non-emergency personnel due to what it referred to as heightened regional tensions. The department posted on X, writing, Iraq. On June 11, the Department of State ordered the departure of non-emergency US government personnel due to heightened regional tensions. As a reminder, the travel advisory for Iraq is level 4. Do not travel. Do not travel to Iraq due to terrorism, kidnapping, armed conflict, civil unrest, and the US government's limited ability to provide emergency services to US citizens in Iraq. Level 4 is the highest possible travel advisory level for any country and only applies in extreme cases to locations that US citizens are strongly discouraged from traveling to. Iraq has been at level 4 status for quite some time, but its travel advisory page was updated on June 11 to reflect the latest news. Despite the risks, the US still has some citizens on the ground in Iraq, carrying out diplomatic missions and other duties, but many of them are currently being removed from the region. According to reports, the State Department recently ordered all American embassies within striking distance of Iran, including missions across the Middle East, North Africa, and Eastern Europe, to convene emergency action committees and discuss measures to mitigate risks. Reportedly, the results of that procedure led the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to make the call to authorize the departure of non-essential personnel from Iraq. One of the anonymous State Department officials who spoke with news media about the story stated, "We're constantly assessing the appropriate personnel posture at all our embassies. Based on our latest analysis, we decided to reduce the footprint of our mission in Iraq." A defense official also reported that the US Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has authorized the voluntary departure of military dependents from locations across the CENTCOM AOR area of operations. CENTCOM, or the United States Central Command, is the military headquarters which oversees the Middle East region as well as parts of Central and South Asia. The official continued, CENTCOM is working in close coordination with our Department of State counterparts as well as our allies and partners in the region to maintain a constant state of readiness to support any number of missions around the world at any time. These statements and actions clearly demonstrate how concerned US officials are about Israel's plans, and even at the highest level, President Donald Trump himself has also expressed great concern for any US citizens remaining in the area. The president was asked about the reports while attending an event at the Kennedy Center in Washington on Wednesday night. He confirmed that US citizens were being evacuated from the area, and when pushed for a reason why, stated,
"Well, they are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens. But they are being, we've given notice to move out, and we'll see what happens."
Later on at the White House, when asked why military personnel's family members and other dependents were being allowed to leave the area, Trump simply said, "You'll have to see." A senior diplomat from within the region echoed the president's concerns and appeared to confirm fears that Israel is planning more than just a small and simple strike, saying, "We're watching and worried. We think it's more serious than any other times in the past." And US officials aren't the only ones worried about major military action in the area. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations, UK MTO, an organisation led by the British Royal Navy, also issued a worrying advisory regarding travel and transit in the waters of the Middle East. The advisory stated, UK MTO has been made aware of increased tensions within the region, which could lead to an escalation of military activity having a direct impact on mariners. Vessels are advised to transit the Arabian Gulf, Gulf of Oman, Straits of Hormuz with caution, and are to report incidents or suspicious activity to UK MTO. Clearly, while they're not giving away too many details as of yet, authorities across the globe are understandably on high alert. This all suggests that Israel is not merely talking about the possibility of an attack or still in the planning stage, but that it may be days or even hours away from launching a strike and appears dead set on taking major action against Iran. And it's no secret that Israel has more than enough firepower, thanks in large part to its strong relationship with the US and other key allies across the globe, to deal serious damage to Iran despite being the much smaller nation. Indeed, in a direct military comparison between the two countries, Iran actually has an edge in several key areas. The Global Firepower GFP Index, which is the leading source for global defense statistics, comparisons, and up-to-date data on dozens of countries around the world, ranks Israel as the 15th strongest military force on Earth, with Iran just one spot behind in 16th. GFP stats show that Iran has a far larger number of soldiers thanks to its dramatically larger population of more than 88 million people, compared to Israel's 9.4 million. Iran can call on close to 50 million people to fight for it in extreme situations and has around 610,000 active duty military personnel, with around 350,000 more in reserve. Israel, meanwhile, has approximately 170,000 active duty soldiers with another 465,000 reservists. In terms of land power, Iran also holds a clear edge. It has over 1,700 tanks compared to Israel's 1,300, as well as more than 65,000 armoured vehicles, while Israel has around 36,000 in total. Iran also boasts more self-propelled and towed artillery systems, along with far more mobile rocket launchers. At sea, Iran also has a notably larger force than its opponent, with a fleet of 107 vessels, including 25 submarines and 7 frigates. Israel, meanwhile, has just 62 vessels, with only 5 subs and not a single frigate in its fleet. However, these numbers do not tell the full story, because despite having fewer tanks, soldiers, boats and artillery systems than Iran, Israel's military is still a major force to be reckoned with, and is arguably stronger than Iran's in many of the metrics that matter the most. Shan Sheikh, former Deputy Director Fellow of the Missile Defense Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS think tank in Washington, explained, Israel certainly has more sophisticated military technology than Iran. They have the latest aircraft, armed with modern missiles and bombs. Their air defenses are clearly effective, but perhaps most importantly, Israel also has powerful partners, namely the United States, but also those in Europe and the Middle East. And if one looks more closely at the type of equipment each country uses, there are numerous examples of this. The aerial forces of Iran and Israel, for example, are notable in their differences. Israel boasts one of the most advanced air forces on the planet, with access to some of the world's fastest, stealthiest, and deadliest fighter jets. It has hundreds of US-made F-15, F-16, and F-35 fighters, for example. In contrast, while Iran's air force has an impressive total of 37,000 personnel, it has just a few dozen operational strike aircraft and relies mainly on old Russian jets and US models dating back to the days before the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Specifically, Iran can call on F-4 and F-5 fighter jets, which were developed way back in the 1950s, as well as the likes of F-7s and a few F-14s, and some Russian Sukhoi 24 and MiG-29s. Side by side, these forces are incomparable. Israel's jets are far more modern and capable, and as Sheikh states, that is a major advantage. Especially in the early stages of an Iran-Israel conflict, Iran is still using decades-old aircraft. It's also worth noting that, because of the fact that Iran and Israel are not neighbours, with borders more than 600 miles apart, and both Iraq and Jordan sitting between them, any possible conflict between the two would be likely to involve aerial bombardment and missile attacks. Again, Israel's advantage in this domain are clear to see. It has one of the most technologically advanced missile arsenals in the entire Middle East region, as well as the renowned Iron Dome air defense system, one of the most advanced in the world. The Iron Dome has proven itself on numerous occasions, blasting enemy missiles from the skies over Israel to prevent successful strikes on the country's cities or other targets. Iran, meanwhile, has a large and diverse missile arsenal, with thousands of ballistic and cruise missiles to call on. It's certainly capable of dealing damage with those missiles, but will not be able to win a war with them outright. Sheikh notes, Iran might have a larger army or population to draw upon, but if a full war breaks out, a lot of the initial fighting will be through air and missile power, and that's where Israel holds strong advantages. Experts like Afshon Ostovar, Associate Professor of National Security Affairs at the US Navy's Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, add that Iran could destroy buildings and cause casualties with its missiles, but Israel, with its more sophisticated technology, would be able to deal far more damage. It could, for instance, get right up close to Iran with its F-35s and launch precision missiles that really will hit their targets. In short, when it comes to the Iranian military versus the Israeli forces, it's a question of quality over quantity. While Iran might be able to point to larger numbers of tanks, vehicles, etc., many of them are old, outdated, and fail to match the more innovative, advanced, and sophisticated systems that Israel can call on. With its superior tech, Israel will likely hold a major advantage, particularly in case of aerial combat and missile strikes. Plus, perhaps most importantly, Israel has the world's biggest and best military force, the United States, to fall back on for support as and when required. The US has historically shared intelligence with Israeli authorities, provided large quantities of weapons and arms packages, and remains committed to supporting and assisting Israel wherever and however possible. And that's exactly the reason why the US is pulling people out of Iraq and neighbouring nations around the Middle East, like Bahrain and Kuwait. The country is rightfully concerned that if Israel goes ahead with this attack, Iran is likely to strike back not only at Israel, but also at the US. Indeed, Iranian officials have more or less confirmed that they will see nearby US bases as viable targets if and when an Israeli attack comes. The country's defense minister, Brigadier General Aziz Nazirzadeh, made a clear statement to reporters on June 11. He said, the US bases are within our reach. We have access to them, and without hesitation, we will target all of them in the host countries. God willing, things won't reach that point, and the talks will succeed. Nazirzadeh added that the US would suffer more losses if a conflict was to break out. By removing its people from the region, the US is at least safeguarding American lives and minimizing the amount of casualties any Iran counterattacks could cause. But it may still choose to strike US bases and other US-owned or operated institutions across the region, which could kickstart a much larger war, with the possibility of US intervention and American troops fighting alongside the Israeli military against Iran in the weeks and months ahead. However, this news all comes at quite an intriguing time, as President Trump has been pushing for a peaceful settlement in the region, urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to hold off any military action for the time being. Trump's administration has also held repeated talks with Iranian leaders, with the aim of encouraging the country to tone down or cease its nuclear program, out of fears that it may be secretly developing nuclear weapons. Understandably, the idea of Iran as a nuclear power is something that Israel and many other nations around the world, including the US, are concerned about. With its own nuclear arsenal, Iran would gain enormous power and influence on the global stage, joining a small but select group of countries with their own nuclear weapons, like the US, the UK, France, Russia, and India. There's no telling if, where, and how it might decide to use those weapons, but it could easily lean on them in order to assert dominance across the Persian Gulf and the wider Middle East region, possibly expanding its territory and potentially ramping up its long-running conflict with Israel in unprecedented ways. That's why Israel has worked tirelessly over the years to delay and disrupt Iran's nuclear development, and the US has also played a big part in that. Indeed, since taking office, President Trump has seemingly made it a priority to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons by any means necessary. Earlier this year, he set a strict deadline for Iran to sit down at the negotiating table and reach a deal over their nuclear program, even going as far as threatening to bomb the country and destroy its nuclear facilities by force if it failed to comply. In March, the president said, "If they don't make a deal, there will be bombing. It will be bombing the likes of which they've never seen before." However, since then, multiple rounds of talks have been carried out with mixed results. At times, it seems as though progress was being made. In April, for example, Trump told reporters,
I think we're doing very well on an agreement with Iran, but that one, we're doing a lot of things, I will say, but that one is well on its way. We could have a very, very good decision, and a lot of lives will be saved.
In May too, the president said that he'd offered an olive branch to Iran and appeared optimistic about a peaceful future for the country and the wider Middle East region, stating,
As I've shown repeatedly, I am willing to end past conflicts and forge new partnerships for a better and more stable world, even if our differences may be very profound, which obviously they are in the case of Iran. I want to make a deal with Iran. If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy. If we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive, maximum pressure.
Unfortunately, in more recent times, Trump's tone has appeared more negative, suggesting that the talks are failing to reach the right conclusion. On Wednesday, June 11, in an interview on the Pod Force One podcast, Trump was asked if he thought he could get Iran to agree to end its nuclear program, responding,
I'm getting more and more less confident about it. They seem to be delaying, and I think that's a shame, but I'm less confident now than I would have been a couple of months ago. Something happened to them, but I am much less confident of a deal being made.
The president was also unequivocal in his view that Iran is not going to have a nuclear weapon and how he would prefer to achieve that aim.
It would be nicer to do it without warfare, without people dying. Yeah. It's so much nicer to do it. But I don't think I see the same level of enthusiasm for them to make a deal.
Despite the president's claims and Israel's alleged attack plans, talks between the US and Iran are still scheduled to continue. The sixth round of talks are due this weekend in Oman on Sunday, with the US negotiator, Steve Witkoff, set to sit down with Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi. Officials say that the talks will go ahead, yet some inside sources suggest that it might be cancelled, depending on what happens over the next few days. Even if the talks do go ahead, it appears that there is still some way to go before any agreement will be made. Just last week, reports emerged that the US had offered an interim agreement to Iran, hoping it might pave the way towards a long-term deal that suited both sides. However, Iran loudly rejected the terms of the agreement, with the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, saying that it contradicts our principle of power by 100% and vowing to continue enriching uranium and proceeding with its nuclear program. A recent report from the International Atomic Energy Agency estimates that Iran has enriched close to 900 pounds of uranium up to 60% purity, which is very close to the 90% enrichment level that the country would need to build its own nuclear weapon. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth appeared to confirm the report's findings in a recent statement, noting,
There are plenty of indications that they have been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon.
It appears then that the US, Israel and Iran have reached an impasse. Despite US efforts, Iran is pushing ahead with its nuclear plans and is now dangerously close to obtaining nuclear arms of its own. The US and Israel will not allow that, and it appears that Israel no longer believes that any peaceful agreement will be reached through words alone. Now, major military action appears the only option, at least for Israel, and the only questions that remain are when will the country choose to strike and how much damage does it intend to do. As Americans flee the area, the world can only watch and wait for Israel to attack. Now, learn more about how and why Iran's army isn't as strong as it seems with our in-depth video guide, or check out our hour-by-hour breakdown of how a US bombing run on Iran's nuclear facilities might unfold. And don't forget to subscribe to our trusted news channel too for more updates on this story as and when they occur.